microphone functions.
Hello.
Does everybody have a working amplification?
Working amplification device.
Turn me on. Oh, that's good.
So this is the Dropping the Geeky Mic panel. If you are not here to listen to our esteemed guests talk about podcasts, then you are in the wrong place, but also you're in the right place. My name is Rugnetta. I'm the writer and host of a YouTube show called Idea Channel. I'm also the creator of a podcast called Reasonably Sound. I'm going to be moderating. The way that we're going to do this is I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves, and then I'm going to start a timer. We will have 20 minutes to go through a short selection of questions that I have prepared for our guests, and then as soon as the timer goes off, we will go into lightning round, where I will ask them 3 very quick questions, and then we will turn it over to the audience. So guys, I want to have plenty of time for you guys to talk. So is everybody okay with that?
Yeah. What if they weren't okay with it?
Say that?
What if they weren't okay with it?
Then we would adjust. I'm a great moderator.
Oh, okay.
Also, I didn't do the thing that you're supposed to do. How's everybody doing? Is everybody psyched?
Yeah!
Okay, so you are all in the right place. Good. So I've introduced myself. I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves. We'll go down the line.
Hi, I'm Cecil Baldwin. I'm the voice of Cecil Palmer on the podcast Welcome to Nickville.
Hi, my name is Dylan Marron, and I am the voice of Carlos the Scientist on the podcast Welcome to Nickville.
Hi, I'm Anthony Rapp, and I'm an actor and other things, but one of the cool things that I've been doing this year is I'm a co-host of a baseball-themed podcast called the Clubhouse Podcast. So,
I'm Jeffrey Cranor. I'm with those 2 other guys down there. I'm the co-writer of the Welcome to Nickville podcast.
My name is the Giant Squidstravaganza, and I'm the host of the Similar podcast.
it's hard to follow up.
You want help?
Everyone close their eyes while I introduce myself so it's more like a podcast and they're like, you can see us now. I'm Zack, I host Game of Bones. I host a podcast called To His Company. I'm a dog owner. I enjoy long walks on the beach with holes in my boots. And I work with film. And I'm here today with all these wonderful people.
Boom. Round of applause for our plan. Alright, the timer has started. We have 25 minutes. So I want to start with a softball. I'm sorry. If you guys could I would love to know what brought each of you to the moment that you were like, I will make a podcast. Or for you guys who perform in one, where this moment where you arrived at, yeah, performing in a podcast is like, I'm on board.
Does it matter who goes first?
It does not. So other than introductions, I'm not a fan of going down the line. So yeah.
Okay, well then, since I'm seizing the moment, my friend Manish Jain is a baseball writer, and he had his own podcast. We met and we started talking baseball very passionately, like weirdos, baseball geeks that we are. And I wanted to do to see all the baseball stadiums. It was part of my little bucket list thing. I'd been to 13. He said, "Well, what about the spring and summer? We could go to the rest of them." So right after this conference, I will have been to all 30 ballparks in my life, which is a bucket list I checked. And in the meantime, too, we started talking about doing a baseball-themed podcast. It wasn't just about like following the teams this year. It wasn't about like just who's winning, who's losing. It was about our relationship to this game, why it means something to us. We started interviewing people like Tom Kidd, the writer of Next to Normal, and If Then, whose father was a former pitcher. It's really about our relationship to the sport, why we love it. So it's really about being a geek, being a fan of the sport and what it means to us. And so I was like right on board with that. I listen to podcasts when I'm mostly in LA driving around because it's such a
You mean being parked?
Yeah. So podcasts have meant something to me in terms of that, like something that's you sort of like suspend yourself into this other world, which is really nice. So yeah.
I come from the background of being a playwright, and so when Joseph Fink, who co-writes the show with me, when he and I co-wrote a play and performed it together in New York back in 2011, we both, in talking to each other over beers a lot about the script and meetings about the show, we both talked about our love of podcasts. There were so many great podcasts happening, and we just love them so much. And you realize that as writers, there's this financial and technological low barrier to entry to do podcasting. We live in this great time when almost anybody for just a few bucks can get the equipment they need and pretty simple software like Audacity is available to you to record and make things for free, and we just thought that this was a really logical step for us writing together and making stories to put out into the world. Also, way cheaper than theater, and I don't have to be there for you to attend my story. I don't have to like standing on stage for you. This time.
There's no week-long tech rehearsal every
No.
time you release an episode.
Right.
The barrier to entry is on both sides though, because it's so incredibly accessible by all of you that listen. And it just creates this wonderful soup and salad, unlimited breadsticks, where all of our ideas, okay, well that one might work, let's put it, there is no top level editing what we do. We have direct access to the audience, and it's a truly beautiful thing to be able to do that, and it to be a medium where such a long form piece of content is acceptable to create. It's fascinating. It's really fun to make them on a regular basis. It's fun to make them on a self-imposed schedule. It really doesn't matter because it's all a personal decision, whoever's creating it.
Yeah, I got into podcasting because there just weren't many squids making podcasts, and I thought there was a space for my voice to be heard. And I had some experience doing production. I used to make a podcast in high school. There's a lot of cassette tapes that I'd give to my friends. So there's about 2 or 3 out there.
So I mean, I got involved with Welcome to Nightville really early on, but I was a total podcast newbie. I mean, I think I listened to like Savage Love and this history podcast about the history of New York, but that was kind of it. And This American Life every once in a while. But that was kind of it. Like I remember, like a few years prior, I just didn't know what it was. I thought podcasts were recorded like in pods or something. I just had no idea.
Wait, do you guys not record yours in a pod?
Well, I've since made my pod. But it's really cool now that like I'm kind of in this world, especially hanging out with Joseph and Jeffrey so much because they have this expansive knowledge of what is out there. They're kind of barometers to be like, to take the 100,000 podcasts that are available and be like, no, this one, or the new, like, or the ones you should be listening to. So I love having that access point.
I got involved in the same way. I mean, I got involved in podcasting because I got an email from Jeffrey asking me to be the voice of Carlos. But since then, it's kind of opened my eyes to this huge world, and you realize in the same way that Twitter is kind of a representation of a lot of voices, and that you need to take a step back from Twitter to see all the voices speaking to each other and see what trends are happening. I think the same is happening with podcasts, and I see that. I mean, there's a wider range in the diversity of podcasts than there is in any other medium. I really believe that, and I think YouTube is the same way, right? Because creators can go right to the source, can bypass the gatekeepers, and can bring it to people, and there are people who respond to that. So yeah, and I've come in touch with a lot of podcasts I love, from the extremely popular like Serial, which I think was an incredibly well-made podcast, to other ones that I don't think many people know about. And just the fact that that's all available for free to us at our fingertips is something that I think is incredible, and I think sadly might change soon in the way that industries evolve.
How do you mean?
I think there is a history of studying all forms of entertainment that have then become commodified by people who take the power of the executives and people who say this is free and this is not free, and I'm going to throw advertising onto this and I'm not going to throw advertising onto this, and you're going to have to pay for it. So we're at a really, really lucky time right now where there's a true democratization of this art form. And I say really take advantage of that now, and I mean, this is a pretty self-selective room where people who are interested in knowing about all this stuff, but yeah, I suspect that entertainment as we know it today is not always going to be that way. So we're at a very, very lucky tipping point, and at this moment in time.
And I think that your comparison to YouTube is a pretty apt one, because YouTube experienced a lot of that same, there was a small community of people who were making non-commercial content, and then now it is a massive entertainment force.
Oh, totally. I mean, beware when there is a huge swelling of popularity in something, as there is in YouTube, as there is in podcasts, there will always be people who come and try and commercialize it and try and capitalize on that. And they're capitalizing on the work of artists. And I don't want to sound like this, crazy liberal artist who's running around, which if I do, that's fine. Maybe that's who I am. But that is something to be aware of. When people who want money and have money see that there is something popular happening, they always want to go there. And I think what is really, really cool, not to just be pessimistic, what is really, really cool is that the groundswell is so big in podcasts and YouTube that I don't know that they're totally going to take over. And
this is actually a path that I want to take a couple steps down, because I think that we could spend an entire panel talking about this. But there's a couple people on the panel mentioned the fact that the barrier to entry for podcasts is so low, that the technological barrier is so low. And that was the same thing we were saying about making YouTube videos 4 or 5 years ago. But weirdly, I find video is, there's a greater technological barrier to make video, but that explosion, however you want to describe it, happened first. I think that's fair to say. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about how and why you identify this current interest in podcasting?
I feel like podcasting require a little more commitment by the listener, because that you are listening. You have to kind of be willing to be with something quietly. That makes sense. In YouTube, I think anything visual is much more easy to sort of just you swipe, oh look, watch. You know what I mean? It takes a little more dedication.
And do you think there's a sort of grand cultural education that has occurred over the last couple of years that made people or audiences in general more receptive to that kind of listenership or that kind of consumption of media?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to tell. I think NPR has been always doing this, and NPR has always been somewhat popular for people who are interested in that sort of thing, and maybe now it's just reaching out because it's so accessible on iTunes, or you can have the podcast app. I mean, all those things probably have helped.
Right, in the way that YouTube provided a funnel for audiences for video, does iTunes provide a funnel for audiences?
Seems like it. And other things like Earwig and Stitcher.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the other thing too is going at the root of the question about why YouTube came first, even though podcasts are ostensibly easier to make, less barrier to entry. But I think it is the conditioning, right? Of we're more prepped to watching television, watching film, like a visual medium, and I think radio now. When people have talked about this rebirth of radio, which I don't know. We get compared to radio dramas, which were really not genre-wise, but there used to be, I think, a real popularity of talk radio that I think has been overrun by two primary types of talk radio now, which are the overlapping FM drive show, and then I think also the crazy political show. And
more InfoWars, please.
and I think that there's something we hear a lot about Night Vale, which is we're I love your show, it puts me to sleep. And
Also listening to you.
Yeah, also listening to you guys. And I think it's meant in a very an honest compliment, because I think about me growing up and listening to the radio, and I used the radio to put me to sleep. I mean, it was this really fun adventure to see if my old 1970s radio that was passed down from my parents that I had in my bedroom, if I could get the Art Bell show somehow in my room, that was a really amazing time, and I would fall asleep listening to really, really insane callers talking about the conspiracy theories that they had. And I think that there's something too where we're not really conditioned in a long time to really have those shows. I don't think we're used to this idea of having this really warm sound of a voice in your ears, and it's a really one-on-one sort of experience that people have.
Yeah, I agree with that. To speak to the relationship of YouTube versus podcasting, I think it's I disagree with Anthony a little bit, because with with YouTube, you kind of need your undivided attention on what's going on. With a podcast, I can put it on when I'm making toast, when I'm making my bed, putting on my eight arm shirts, 10 arm shirts. How many of these do I got? Yeah, 10.
I do think, I mean, not that this is totally a debate that we need to go down, but I do think to me listening to podcasts is a lot more like reading. And so I actually do agree with you, Anthony, because whenever I'm listening to episodes of our podcast, Welcome to Night Vale, I always think that I can do it while I'm doing stuff around the house, that I can play it on my speakers. But it's like, if I miss one thing, that's like bypassing a really crucial passage in a book. So I have to listen to podcasts when I am fully engaged in it. And so I just have to like kind of plant myself and sit there and let it kind of come over me. And so I really do think it's much more like reading, in the sense that we only have one in, right? It's just, the only switch is that it's not visual, it's oral. So we have to just, we just have to switch our way of thinking, but it demands that same focus in the sense that I would not be reading a book like sentence by sentence while I'm doing errands around my house. I have more thoughts on this, but I don't want to go on.
Well, I think this makes me think of something that is we're not continuing down the why are podcasts suddenly so popular pathway, which is that what do you guys feel is are there types of stories that podcasts are especially good at telling in comparison to other things? Like what is the thing that podcasts can do that is like reading but is not like reading? And I think that might, we have several different perspectives on the panel to answer that question, whether it's writing or performance or whatever.
So I think conversations, certainly like interview type conversations, or when if it's like This American Life or those kinds of things, that you can, whatever reason, I don't know why, but when these things happen on TV, if it's a TV news program, unless it's Charlie Rose, does Charlie Rose even exist anymore?
Yeah.
On TV? Yeah. So that's like the only one that you can have an extended conversation about something. And I don't know if it's like a chicken or the egg thing, which came first, but something about podcasts allows people to really dive deep into something.
It's like My Dinner with Andre really just should have been a podcast.
Yeah. So that's
part of it. Thank you for the one person who likes it.
But that's part of it for me. If it's a nonfiction kind of podcast, a conversational kind of podcast.
We have an in format, just an MP3 file that we send through. And with that, it's just kind of a beautiful thing with the diversity of art that's made at this table alone. The flexibility of what we can fit inside of only using audio, whether it's storytelling, whether it's broadcasting a conversation that you share with your friends, whether it's particularly crafting a conversation for an audience that would enjoy insight into a particular subject. That's 3 examples, and I feel like we're sitting here and we're discussing how we're inside of what could be considered partially the golden age of this medium. We don't know, we're still like 19 years old in this. Like the internet is brand new. We don't know what it can become. It's so fresh and it's compelling because shows like yours are pushing the envelope in so many different ways and inspiring other creators to approach the medium with fiction in mind. And that's cool, because that's not easy to do when you could just record yourself talking to your friends or talking about your favorite subject. That takes production, that takes writing, that takes time to do things correctly. And that's flexing the muscles of what we can do. It's flexing the muscles of the delivery system. And I think that's really what's brought it to a place that's large enough for all of you to congregate into one room. The fact that Apple has given title to something that has always been available. We've always been able to make audio programs. We've always been able to sit down and record. I remember being a little kid trying to make my own version of Orson Welles on the radio, or listening to the scary Halloween soundtracks and learning how footsteps leading to a door can be ominous. The door creaking can be scary. Like these are triggers in our brain, and we've utilized what Apple has done, and they put a name on it, podcast, which is convoluted because I think a lot of people in this room, maybe in the early stages, considered it something that you can only do through an iPod, and it lost so much of an audience in the early days, but now it's an app that's built into someone's cell phone, and things like Serial are pushing it into the brain of people that aren't quite connected to their devices, like us sitting in a room that will go to a place like Geekycon. So it's just, it's fascinating to see it be stretched and bended and moved, but I truly believe that we're still so early in the mix. Like the stuff that I make with my friends, it's so much fun to do, and that's why we do it, because we enjoy it so much, and seeing the happiness that it causes and increases on the faces of people that listen is outstanding, because it's literally fun for us to do, and it's literally easy for us to do, comparatively speaking, to the audience that it reaches. So it's just, the currency is undeniably excellent right now, and the work that we put into it is nothing compared to what could be eventually utilized if it stays as untouched as it is. And I hope that it does, because that gives the freedom for the growth that is necessary here in these early stages to really turn into something special. And I think that, just like everyone at this table has been doing, I mean, I'm sitting beside this. You know what I'm saying?
That tickled.
But Zach, I wonder if there's something that you can, right? It sounds like one of the assets of making a podcast is that you can turn something like a conversation into a story, into an important or moving piece of media, so that it becomes a conversation but not a conversation. I wonder if you can put a little bit of a point on where, like, does that line get crossed simply because you record it and distribute it and know that you have an audience, or does that line get crossed in some other way?
That's a tough question. It really depends on what it is. Sometimes the stuff that we make, Eric and Mike are back there right now, sometimes the stuff that we make, it is purely a stream of consciousness. Sometimes it needs to be crafted. Sometimes it demands extra attention. Sometimes we would like to give it extra attention because we would like to make it special for people. So really, it's a line that I think is still so flexible, at least in our case, because it's whatever you make it, it's your personal decision. Now, something like Welcome to Night Vale, I mean, you guys have a very firm direction, and we're all telling a story in some way.
Yeah, because Jeffrey, I've heard both you and Joseph say that you are sort of protective in some way of the kinds of stories that can be told using podcasts, and that you have there's like a flag in the sand. And I wonder if you could talk about where you guys are coming from when you say stuff like that.
Well, I think like for us, like with how Night Vale is told, we definitely have, we definitely like kind of, because it is scripted. There's this thing where this is very specific as to how we approach what we do. The personality is built in the relationship between writer and performer, the agreement that you make as an actor and playwright to say this is how the character will build and grow. I mean, I don't know necessarily that we're dogmatic about what a podcast needs to be. I would say the one thing that I feel like more than anything, and I think it goes beyond Night Vale into conversational, into This American Life, into any subject matter, that the number one thing that makes a good show, when you're talking about podcast or radio, is personality more than content. It's the personality of the people that make that work. The casting of those two guys down there in our show is really, really vital, not just because they're good actors who bring life to words, who make our words better than they are, but also because their personas that they create for the audio are people that the listeners connect to. And so when you have a conversational show, I think that probably, if you have a successful show let me use an example. One of my favorite podcasts in the entire world is The Read. And I just think The Read is great. It is such a perfect podcast in so many ways, and it is about pop culture. And this is something I do not know a thing about, and I don't necessarily feel like I learn a whole lot about pop culture listening to the show, but it is two people who interact so perfectly with one another. It is back and forth, they fight, they argue, they do a little bit of back and forth, they're really funny, their laughs are so contagious. And I think that when I listen to that show, I'm like, this is the perfection of improvised conversation, and I want it every single week. And I think that to me is more than anything, if I'm dogmatic.
It's the car talk formula.
Yes!
I
Yes!
don't know anything about cars, but I can listen to car talk.
I love click and clack.
Jeffrey, if I could just offer you a correction here. With podcasts, we're talking about personalities of squid as well as human people.
Geekycon is inclusive.
They call it, they implemented a podcast because I had that Sepharda podcast first. But to add to what you're saying about making personality come through, I think the beauty of podcasting is that you get to create a nice little sound environment, and it becomes a place where the words that somebody's saying is echoed through the tones you're making. When I make my podcast, like I have my microphone, and I put my tentacles on my synthesizers, and the other one's Googling sound effects. This one's gonna, pull up my script, let me know what I'm about to say. And, multitasking.
Right, because there is a certain amount of freedom in that, because you don't actually have to, if you had originally conceived of Night Vale as a TV show, how much heavy lifting would that be? That is, or even as a YouTube show.
I want that to happen, by the way. That would be cool.
You can just create the universe in a way that doesn't require crazy amounts of resource.
I mean, I think like one of the cool things is that what makes podcasts is that it is kind of about storytelling, and certain stories lend themselves to a little air of mystery where you don't have to kind of put your finger on everything. And I think YouTube shows, if it was like a web series, like the second you film it, the second you give the people a visual and an oral representation of what the world is and who these characters are and what does everything look like. You're naming it, you're defining it, and that kind of takes some of the like the heavy lifting off the viewer. And one of the joys of working on Nightville is that I don't think we know sometimes what exactly everything
all the way down.
Yeah, like we kind of like roll around in that mystery, that ambiguity of what's happening. In the same way that like conversation podcasts, like I don't need to know what these people look like. I just know that they're having this engaging, awesome conversation, and it doesn't matter what the visuals are because I'm locked into the words. I know I kind of get that's when fans kind of discover the podcast and then find Instagram or Twitter or whatever. They're like, oh, that's what you look like. Now my headcanon is ruined. Well,
I'm so sorry.
That like the fact that you had a headcanon that was completely created by you, I think if it was a video, then that step would have been taken out.
Right, like what about your existence erases the thing that someone has?
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't. And with that, the timer has gone off, so we're going to move into lightning rounds.
Can I just add one more thing, Mike, please?
You're going to have to ask the audience.
Yeah.
When I first started my podcast, a lot of people no one had seen a giant squid before. It's only very recently that humans have looked at giant squids, and I just wanted to start looking back at them with my giant eye. That's why I started.
Anthony, did you want to add anything?
No.
Okay, so we're going to do 3 questions really quick. Everybody has to answer each of these questions. The first is the last podcast you listened to.
Indoor Kids.
99% invisible last time.
We got this with Mark Gagliardi and Hal Lublin.
It was the WTF interview with Barack Obama.
I listened to the Night Vales, actually.
Mark Maron with Barack Obama.
Your favorite word to say into a microphone.
Oh, no.
Concupiscence.
Yes.
Barack Obama.
Obvious.
Hello.
Testing.
Oh no. Yeah.
And finally, like the foundational podcast for you, which can be, this is the podcast that got you into podcast, or when someone says, I don't know, like I can't get into podcasts, like what's a good podcast for me to listen to? Those are candidates for answers to this question.
This American Life.
Yeah, I really liked that Judge Boom Ride at Radio Lab. She'd make all sorts of noises. That made me want to make more noises.
For me, it was. For me, it was the podcast "Stop Podcasting Yourself," and I think that was sort of like the quintessential, like conversational podcast that got me very interested in the form.
I'm constantly inspired by Mark Maron's interview tactics. I think it's a beautiful thing. Probably go with WTNV. I think it was Bowery Boys or Savage Love. I think were one of the first ones I started listening to.
Bowery Boys is great.
For me, Joseph Fink just introduced me to Criminal, which is a new podcast I really hope you guys listen to. Really, really well produced. And it's true crime in a really, really concise way. New stories every week or every show.
Cool.
Sweet. All right, lightning round is over. Now we're going to move into audience questions. We have 20 minutes, which sounds like it's a lot of time, but I promise it's not. So just before we get into it, there are a couple ground rules. We're going to stick to questions, not statements, no reactions. Questions, for anybody who needs a friendly reminder, begin with W or H and end with a question mark. They do not begin with I. Questions do not begin with I. Good? Here we go.
Excuse me.
This question is mostly for Zack or the Giant Squidstravaganza, but definitely open to anyone. Do you ever worry that you have to edit your free flow of thoughts while recording because you don't want to offend someone with something you said, you don't want to ruin your chance of sponsorship, or you feel nervous about sharing your deep thoughts on things like problems within Game of Thrones or capitalism and toast?
You want to start?
Well, yeah, I do a lot of editing. It's normally about 20 hours of me talking. Then I stick down to 15 minutes. I just leave the tape on. It's rolling right now. But as far as my viewers, my listenership, excuse me, not many people look at Giant Squids, as I said. I'm pretty much trying to tell it like it is. Like, I live in a squid in a human-dominated world. They're running their ships, building oil rigs, drilling down deep, messing everything up, and it's pissing me off.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Sure, yeah.
The answer is yes. A short answer to that is a lot of our downtime is just sort of saying things that we know would be incredibly offensive to people, just as an exercise in what not to do. We just kind of riff back and forth and have a good time. And, sometimes we'll take a bathroom break mid-show. A lot of people never know about. I'm sure people at this table can speak to that. There's things that you definitely added out of your show.
The ocean's like a big bathroom.
Convenient.
I mean, that's the beauty of all this, is that it's not live radio. Is that, while that was scripted, you do have even if it weren't, I think I would still, like you just said, you have that moment to sit there and reflect on what you said. And even in radio, you have a 7-second delay typically for a dump button or something like that. But there's always that moment where if you are in free-form conversation, you want to be really conscious, but sometimes you also have to let your mind kind of say things. And the beauty of podcasts, you have the ability to be like, let's just take that out, because there's a lot of things that could go wrong.
Have you guys?
I just actually wanted to turn that question to you, because I was curious, even though it's not a podcast, it is, your thoughts, like, through the idea channel. Is there a sense of letting the camera run and then editing, or is there a...
Yeah, idea channel is highly scripted. That doesn't stop you from saying things that I shouldn't. It happens all the time. And, I'm a human being. I get mad or take things personal. Jeffrey, because you guys, even though Night Vale is highly scripted, you guys had situations where you've said you've like accidentally suggested like political things or like lifestyle things where people then respond and they're like, oh man, that was like kind of cut to the core a little bit, or like does that, when those things happen, do you then reassess? Like the next time you're writing something, do you think, oh, okay, what kind of hot water do you avoid the hot water, or do you just?
I think it depends on how it's approached, right? I think if people seem legitimately like upset by something, like you really like hurt something or hurt somebody's feelings or did something that seemed harmful. We haven't really gotten a lot of that, but sometimes people via email or something will let us know, and it's something that we can just sort of reflect on. I mean, we've never had anything we've done that was like a complete and total disaster. The two things we've gotten the most like uptight reaction to were like, well, we already have a bunch of emails from last night because we changed the theme music slightly. And, so it's
Dang it, I haven't listened yet.
This is now the crucified chicken.
I think all these guys, I think no matter what you're doing, you have an audience, and your audience, I don't think you have to cater to your audience constantly. You always want to challenge your audience with new things and talk about things and not be afraid of your audience ever. You want to respect and love your audience, but know that they should respect and love you too, and this is a give and take. And so I think when you start hearing certain things, you can really take it to heart, and you can really rethink how you approach using words or how you approach doing things. And sometimes when you have a story where the lead character is in a relationship with another man, and you get emails from people complaining about that, there are some times when you're like, well, I don't need you in my audience, and so you can do that too. But there are people where you're like, I think just as a person, like if you came to me, Mike, and were like, hey, this you said to me the other day, I was a little taken aback by that. And you and I can process what that is, and I think that's really all it comes down to, is processing, not overreacting and taking it.
I mean, there's like a concrete example. I think early on in Night Vale, we used the phrase like, ladies and gentlemen, da 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 da, and then after a couple of episodes, we're like, wait, why are we doing that? And then it became listeners, like Cecil uses the word, like, listeners do this, that, and the other, and that was like a conscious decision. We're like, wait, why are we putting a label on this?
It's a great example because people brought it to our attention about how limiting that is when you talk about the gender spectrum and what that means, and we were creating just like a very standard binary. And also, just as a writer, you're like, also it doesn't make sense. Like, I don't think I've ever heard a radio show where they're like, ladies and gentlemen. I'm like, that's really like old-timey vaudeville or something. So it was a great show. Great thing. So it's a great example.
Next question, right here.
Has your interest in podcasts maybe stemmed from old-time radio, especially the Squid? Because I know it isn't really represented as a Squid community. But
repeat that question.
The relationship to your current podcasting expertise and old-timey radio, maybe like radio drama, radio plays.
Yeah, my podcast is usually divided into a few segments. I have one particular segment that is akin to an old radio drama, so that's been informed by historical precedents based on human entertainment circa 1930 to 1950.
I remember growing up and being in the car with my mom and like on a drive home from Chicago when I'd done a play, and some local radio station would play old radio dramas, and I remember being in the back seat and sort of being sleepy and listening to that. And I remember the creaky door, and they had all that stuff. And that's certainly part of my experience growing up that really meant a lot to me.
It's beautiful. Anything image you can get in your mind, it's like reading a book. Except it's being read to you, and you can hear the things and the footsteps. It's fun. Yeah. It's I would definitely say that I was inspired when I was young. By not only talk radio, but also American Cities and Doors as well, and War of the Worlds, stuff like that just really fascinating me. I got this tape once with Donald Tackernell. That was their spooky tape thing. It was one of the scariest things I've ever listened to. It was not candy. It was like, you come to the wrong door. You're not getting out alive.
I really want to know how this tape holds up. I'm gonna find out.
It was so scary, but it's one of my dreams to work or to be involved with fiction through audio. It's not something I've done yet, personally, but it's such a fun idea, and I'm glad that someone's doing it, and some people are. It's so cool, and this guy's doing it in real life. Like, how cool is that? You know? It's awesome. It's so fun.
But for me, it was less about like radio, and it was about storytelling. You know, it was like I grew up in kind of the mountains of Tennessee, and I used to do this like ghost story competitions, and you go like Boy Scout camping trips and things like that. And you know, like I really love the like late at night around the campfire ghost stories, and you know, inevitably it was always like an insane asylum just around the corner from here. And it was the immediacy. It was like it always was just around the corner from here, no matter where you were. It's right there. It's right there. You know,
insane asylums in this country.
Yes, and people keep escaping.
Oh, they all. I blame the Reagan administration.
Antidepressants are now their own insane asylums.
But those were like the most evocative things, and it was always, you know, what my imagination filled in. Like that to me was like the cool stuff, you know. And I think that was what kind of inspired me to get into storytelling in general.
Another question, right here. Yeah, you with the blue and gold.
I know for Night Vale it must be really hard to keep all of the rules together because Night Vale has so many different rules. How do you guys keep track of that? And for the other podcasts, how do you keep track of the ideas you've already discussed so that you don't end up repeating yourself?
God bless whoever made the Night Vale Wiki. Because I use that thing all the time.
So you guys have like a George R.R. Martin style relationship?
Yeah, it's like because I usually when the show comes out, I give it a listen once to be like, oh, what is the music that Joseph put behind it, or what, how does it sound all together, and then I kind of put it on a shelf. So like a year and a half, 2 years later, I'm like, wait. Oh crap, did this character have a specific voice? Oh man, what episode were they in? Oh god, okay, Night Vale Wiki, cross-reference with this, and then, go back and kind of find it and listen to it. Yeah, and that's, God bless whoever made that, because it's a really awesome reference tool.
Because other than that, it's mostly in our heads, and we sort of rely on ourselves, and sometimes the actors will catch things too, but we rely on ourselves. And usually you can search your documents and look up facts and things like that, like how old is so-and-so, or whatever, when's the last time we mentioned this, or what's that, you can look for certain keywords. But like recently it was really tough because I was trying to mention, I was putting in about Cecil, the character Cecil, talking about his home. And I was like, I don't remember if we got him into a house or an apartment, because at one point, but I was trying to remember it. So it's this thing of like, how do I even search for that, right? Like it's just, anyway, so there was just, it just took a while to kind of like go back through. Yeah, no.
I mean, yours is narrative, right? So you probably have to listen from the beginning. Some other podcasts, it's sort of like you can kind of drop in at any time. So in a way, we don't have to worry too much about repeating ourselves because, we put them out in an order, but if you listen to episode 6, it doesn't necessarily mean you missed anything that would be crucial to your understanding. You know what I mean? So we try not to repeat ourselves, but at the same time, we're not weirdly crazy about it because, you could listen to anyone at any time.
It's a conversation. You can always circle back in conversation and be like, oh yeah, I remember that, and elaborate.
I think the fact that time plays into our releases is a really fascinating part of what podcasts are. Because, for example, Micah would be teasing, oh yeah, blah blah blah, about something that happens later in Game of Thrones, like 4 years ago on the show, and we didn't know. And then 4 years later, we get a payoff of something that was set up, and it's just like, holy shit. That's crazy. And the listeners would never let us forget all of the details to answer that question specifically, because, it's just like emails, Facebook messages, we get actual ravens sent to us. Any way that's possible. Corrections are the first thing that we get. So, yeah.
Human person. I don't really have that problem because I got great memory up here. My brain is shaped like a donut, and that's the way it should be.
Next question.
Night Vale gentleman and the squid. How does it feel to be kind of the forerunners in more controversial things? Like Cecil and Carlos are canonically gay couple, and they're really out there. Like, people know of them. I was talking earlier, and we couldn't think of another canon couple that was gay. So it's like, how does it feel to be the leader, to bring that out there and make that known? And squids, how does it feel?
I mean, it's like, be the change you want to see in the world. Reflect the world that you want to see. I mean, I'm gay. I think it kind of sort of came out of that, or it's just like, oh, why not? Like I got the script and I was like, well, if I met this incredibly handsome scientist that's like gorgeous, this is how I would react, and just kind of ran from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge honor, and it's a really big responsibility too. I wish Carlos and Cecil were around when I was growing up, and I also, something that isn't talked about a lot. I think we talk about the fact that they're a queer couple, but they're also an interracial couple. I didn't have many models that looked like my parents. I have a white mom and a Hispanic dad. And I think public work and putting your face up there with your work is something that kind of has gotten a bad rap recently in the Kardashian era that we live in. But
I was going to ask why.
yeah, okay. No, I mean getting your face out there. But I was really hesitant to jump on the social media train. And then I just went full throttle because I realized that social media, putting your face on social media, even the idea of taking a selfie, and I don't want to get into an academic talk about unpacking the selfie, but that's like a microcosmic example of this, right? Like, get your face out there so there are other people who see that there is an existence like theirs. And it's just this kind of like blip on a satellite. It's like, oh, there's a light like me over there, and there's a light like me over there. And that's how communities are created. And I think what an appropriate place to be talking about that in, right? We're at Geekycon. We're at a place where so many people were connected by the internet. We're all about like sending out our signals to say, I exist and you exist and we all exist together. And then every so often we can come into places like this. And I think storytelling and representation storytelling is very similar. That you're sending out a blip that you exist, and that's why I really commend writers and creators who want to put stories like that out there.
And we never took the approach of trying to be controversial about it, or courting controversy, or saying, look at how progressive we are, because I feel like when you do that, you belittle the very thing you want to represent. You take the characters that you spent all this time developing and that you care for because you've built them into humans in a way, and you've built them out as people, and the people that you care about, and when you say, okay, now I'm going to reduce them to the kernel of idea of that they are a political controversy, and I'm going to draw attention to that, I feel like that's so reductive. I feel like, no, this is who we are, this is the world that I want to create, and I'm not going to apologize for that, I'm just going to put it out there, and it's your job to deal with it. And I think that to me is how you create anything, whether or not somebody deems it politically controversial, or whether or not you're just describing a tree in poetry. I think you just say, this is what I made, that you deal with it. I'm not going to tell you you need to have a problem or not have a problem with this.
Could you pick up your mic and then drop it?
No, please.
I used the phrase "very special episode" the other day, and that to me kind of like put that nail on. I was just like, oh yeah, it's like when you get that feeling of like, this is the very special gay episode, this is the very special interracial episode. Your just automatic reaction is like, well, I can see you're trying to do good, but oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, that reinforces
the
all.
context, for a kid growing up, and if you're 13 seeing a very special episode, maybe that will make your antenna go up and maybe you'll pay a little more attention. Maybe that's a good thing too. So I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater entirely.
Yeah. But it's just, yes, then that's what the story becomes, right, Jeffrey? It's like, if you tell the story of a gay couple, well, that's not an interesting story. You can't just put gay people on screen and that's interesting, but it's the story around it.
Oh, and it does depend on, like Anthony, you were just saying, I think it's a great point, which is that on the very special episode, growing up in the 80s, like you had the very special episode of Blossom or whatever, and you had, and it dealt with issues where you had after school specials and you had the end of G.I. Joe and knowing is half the battle and all of that kind of thing. And you say, no, I mean, I really do legitimately feel like I learned things from the last 5 minutes of G.I. Joe.
But there's something to be said about learning something while also like leaning really hard on normativity and saying like, oh, like this is special because it's not normal when really it's just, it is normal, it's just not represented.
And I think there's a great place for agitprop. I just love that type of thing. I think you need messages that are hardcore and focused and explanatory and make people understand something they don't already. Night Vale is just not that. So when I speak to that, I just speak to my approach to writing my own fiction. Is basically it. I don't want to belittle this other thing. It's just Night Vale doesn't go in that way.
So we have literally 1 minute left, and sorry, we can't do any more questions. I want to just give the panel a chance to talk about the next thing that they have coming out, and to sort of self-promote for a second, and then we'll call it a day.
Not done? Okay, we keep going. I'm keeping you first. I did a couple of cool little independent films. One about a gay wedding. We actually were filming the wedding on the day that the Supreme Court ruling